Oscars?
No, I work at a nice restaurant, so I got a tuxedo on. Yeah, I did buy the shirt for this episode because we have fun, and that's who I am, and that's what we care about. Hello, I'm Alison Roman. Welcome to Home Movies. I know that like prime rib feels like a thing that you only have at a restaurant, but today we're gonna make it at home because I feel like for the holidays, if you do decide to gather safely, you're gonna wanna like maybe cook one meal that feels above the rest. And as you know, I'm sort of opposed to most fancy things, except for tuxedos, obviously. But I do feel passionately about like celebrating something, whether that's like just making it through the year or just like, I don't know, like you made it. I don't know. We all made it, sort of. We made it. So this doesn't have to be like tied to any specific holiday, but I do sort of feel like cooking a very large bone-in ribeye roast along with some creamed spinach and some boiled baby potatoes with some butter and chives. We'll drink red wine. I don't know, it feels really festive.
Bing bong.
Bing bong. I don't get it yet.
I will show you Bing bong.
Okay.
So the Knicks have just won their first game in double overtime.
Double overtime! What the baby? New York is back! I'm from New York, and you know what? Tom Brady's a Tom Brady. Bing bong. Tell me a little something, KD. Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks? Let's go Knicks! Let's go Knicks!
So because that one guy in the middle who says Bing bong,
Yeah.
now whenever anything happens with the Knicks, people on the internet all just say Bing bong.
Okay, well that was a total waste of our time. Also, it's amazing to me how much faith people can put in a team that consistently loses and like they do one thing not wrong and everyone goes absolutely buck wild. Like imagine if you lived your life that way, where like you were just constantly losing and then one day you didn't and everyone's like, you're the best. It's like, well, I should try that. I'm from California where our teams win. Bing bong. This episode of Home Movies is brought to you by State Farm. You don't have to give up what you love to have great insurance. State Farm offers surprisingly great rates for both your home and your car. It may surprise you that for the holidays, when I'm throwing parties, I actually scale back. It's less is more. I serve one thing. It's gotta be a holiday ham, some shrimp cocktail, and martinis, and that's it. If you wanna bring something else, great, but that's all I'm bringing you. That's it, that's the surprise. Surprise, you get one thing, it's ham. The reason I like going with one thing is because you can focus on it and you can do it really well and you can kind of make it like a full thing. So for me, I do one big, beautiful holiday ham that I sort of make my own seasoning rub for. I don't do the glaze. And then I set out Martin's potato rolls, I do mustards, I do pickles, I do little plates and napkins, and people can kind of like do their own sandwiches, they can slice their own ham. It is like a DIY ham party, and I cannot recommend anything more. Surprise, it's ham. State Farm is looking to surprise you across the board. They're huge on surprises, not in a bad way, not a creepy surprise, like a good surprise, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these rates are so low, that kind of surprise. So when it comes time to shopping for insurance, State Farm can help you get surprisingly great rates on both your car and your home, or you can work with them to sort of customize a plan that works for you and your lifestyle. Whew. Surprise! Dan, was that your box?
Oh God.
Things are really going off the rails. All right, action. Prime rib. Although it's a rib roast. What's the difference between prime rib and rib roast? I think it's called a prime rib roast. Prime rib, rib roast, prime rib roast. It is the most expensive thing that I have purchased in the kitchen in a very long time. But again, this is a special occasion meat. And you can do this recipe with slightly more affordable cuts, like tenderloin, or honestly, just do a smaller rib roast. This could feed, I wanna say like, depending on what else you're eating and who's eating, 20 people. I think it is like a nice way to say, we're celebrating, I care, I love you. It's also still way cheaper to do this than to go out to a steakhouse. Bing bong! This is effectively 3 bone-in ribeyes just together. So when you go to the butcher and you order a bone-in ribeye, they're taking it from this whole cut and they're just cutting between the bone, and that becomes your ribeye. If it's boneless, they're cutting it off the bone. So that's why they can be thinner than this, but that's why I like the bone-in ribeye. I prefer this style of meat for roasting to say a tenderloin, which tends to be very, very lean and have like a one-note texture. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna season it with salt and pepper. That's all we're doing, and that can be done up to 2 days in advance. And honestly, the longer and more advanced you can do that, the better. So I'm seasoning, again, like a teaspoon per pound. This is about 6 pounds, so I'm gonna go about 6 teaspoons of salt. I don't really eat that much red meat. It's like not really my thing. I never cook it like during the week when it's just for me. I think that meat should be enjoyed sparingly. I think it should be enjoyed special occasion. If it feels expensive, that's okay, because raising and housing and sustainably keeping animals alive and then slaughtering and butchering them in a humane way should cost money. That's like a skill and a talent, and it takes resources and people's expertise. And I think that those things should reflect that like level of care in the price tag. The technique that we'll do for this meat, which is like called a reverse sear, is the technique of, instead of searing the meat and then letting it rest or slow roasting it, we're gonna slow roast it at a low temperature until it's basically the temperature we want it. And then we're going to sear it in a skillet or, put it under the broiler. And what that does is it sort of makes it almost impossible for your meat to overcook because you're cooking it at such a low temperature. But what it also does is think about meat when we're searing it and then we let it rest, so like to let the juices settle. We are effectively doing that the entire time it's roasting, so you're cutting down on the resting time. So you can go from the oven to searing it to slicing it almost immediately. I'm just gonna set this back here to rest while we make the anchovy rub for it. A meat like this will be so perfect just with salt and pepper, I think. You don't really need anything more than that. I am gonna rub it with some stuff, because rubbing it with something that can roast slowly alongside it, like on top of it, and kind of get sticky and like create almost like a crust on the outside, makes the entire thing that much more enjoyable. It doesn't really flavor the inside of the meat, but it does like get brown alongside the outside of the meat. So 6 to 8 cloves of garlic, depending on how big they are, or how much patience you have, or how many garlic cloves you have, which mine is the number 7. In this bowl, we're gonna finely grate some garlic, finely chop some rosemary, and finely chop some anchovies, which we haven't seen in a while, so don't give me that. So depending on how big these sprigs are, 2 to 3 sprigs of rosemary. A little bit goes a really long way, so we'll put this aside. And I'm gonna drain these little babies. I'm gonna chop the rosemary first. So I've gone pretty fine on this, because if there's anything I hate than too much rosemary, it's like really large pieces of rosemary. You can use thyme here as well. Honestly, it would also be really good just garlic and anchovies. These I'm just gonna chop with my knife. This is a whole tin. Anchovies come in jars, they come in tins, they come in large tins, but this is standard sort of 2-ounce tin. In fact, I almost wanna add 2 tins. I don't hate the Knicks. I'm Knicks agnostic.
You like going to the next game?
Yeah, I do. I love going to basketball games. Maybe I should start going, because when I lived in California, my dad was a huge Clippers fan when nobody cared about the Clippers, and now look at them. And then when I lived in San Francisco, I used to go to Warriors games because they were like giving tickets away for free because they were such a bad team, and now look at them. So maybe I should start going to Knicks games. Maybe it would help them out a little bit.
Wow. So you're saying you can make them good?
It worked for the Clippers and it worked for the Warriors.
Bing bong.
Bing bong. I'm gonna go 2 tins, because why not? You may notice that I'm boiling some potatoes back there, or maybe you haven't noticed, I don't know. That's because we're gonna eat this prime rib roast with some boiled baby potatoes that are buttered and chived. All right, anchovies in, garlic going in. So our potatoes are going, our rib roast is almost gonna roast. This has been seasoned in advance, and we're about to rub it with our garlic mixture. David's helping me out because I hurt myself earlier, and it's a long story. So in this bowl, we have 2 tins of finely chopped anchovies, 7 cloves of garlic grated, and 2 large sprigs of rosemary. I'm gonna add a little bit of olive oil, just enough to kind of make a paste, which is gonna help me spread this on. And then I'm gonna season it with pepper. We probably don't need to add any salt because of the anchovy, but I'll still taste it. We are adding oil and other ingredients that don't contain salt, so we just wanna make sure that this is as well seasoned as possible. Not much to look at, but boy, is this delicious. This I swear. And I swear. I actually need some salt. And for anyone who's concerned about the anchovy of it all, please know that this is not going to make your rib roast fishy or taste like fish or anchovies. It is going to make it like somehow even meatier and more delicious tasting and like deeper flavored, and the texture of it on the outside is gonna be really nice and crunchy and crispy, and it's gonna make the pan juices crazy delicious. And I'm gonna spread this on. You can use your hands, which I will do. And you kind of wanna like focus on the top. Anything that you put on the sides and the underside is gonna really just kind of melt off, but I'll still give it like a chance to kind of penetrate a little bit in there. But really what we're after is like this, which is an extremely satisfying sort of feel-good process. If you're too firm with your movements, it's just gonna peel right off. So you do kind of wanna like pat it on. And you'll notice that when it roasts, it's gonna stay almost like a little crust. Any bits that fall off here are gonna make its way to like our final salsa verde saucy thing that we serve alongside. So all of this is gonna get used. It's just very good when this stuff gets browned on top. You can also do this part a day or two ahead of time. Just be prepared for your fridge to smell intensely of garlic.
Do you do the bottom at all, or it doesn't matter?
I didn't do the bottom. I would use the same amount of rub for like a slightly smaller roast. You'll just rub it on the underside. But like I said, that's just gonna kind of fall off. And because it's the bone, I feel like it's less important because it ends up on the bottom of your sheet pan. I like to season my rib roast on a wire rack because when you season it in advance, like a lot of the water comes out of the meat and it gives that liquid somewhere to go. But I don't need it to roast. Make a little bed for it. If you don't have a sheet pan, this also works really well, just like a baking dish, but there's no reason anyone needs to purchase a roasting pan. This is as big of a cut of meat as I would ever need to cook. And it's time for this little fella to go in the oven. I just put that rib roast into the oven at 250, and it's gonna take about 2 to 2.5 hours. So I'm gonna go cuddle with my cat, and I will see you in a bit. Welcome back to rib roast night. I have previously boiled some potatoes, which I'm going to toss with some butter and chives, and it's gonna be lovely and delicious. And then I'm also gonna make some creamed spinach. This could be a creamed kale, it could be creamed mustard greens, creamed Swiss chard. Any mix of the aforementioned greens would work really well here. Point being is we're gonna simmer some cream with some garlic and cracked pepper, maybe a little nutmeg, which gives it that distinct creamed spinach flavor, and toss in some wilted greens. To me, it's like a very quintessential side for your rib roast. The rib roast has been in there for 3 hours now. I'm gonna check the temperature. Again, it's gonna be tough to overcook this, and there shouldn't be any surprises, but I do wanna just like be sure that I'm paying attention to it. I'm using my ThermoPen, not sponsored, to just insert this into the deepest part right in the center. I can already tell we're not close. We're looking for 125 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm at 85, so I think this needs like another half hour to 45 minutes. So I'm gonna start by simmering like a cup and a half of cream. That's not what I meant to do. I meant to put that in this teeny pot. Outfit change. So I'm gonna simmer this cream with some crushed garlic, salt, pepper. And for these, I'm just gonna smash them. And I'm gonna let that come to a simmer, and it's gonna gently reduce. If you add unreduced cream to your greens, it's gonna be really thin and sort of soupy. We don't want that. We want it to be like nice and thick and creamy. So our spinach, I am gonna take off the stems here, and we'll give it a rinse, because spinach can be especially dirty. The way that it grows is in very sandy soil, very close to the ground. So this is typically in the ground, and that's why your spinach is typically like a lot sandier than say kale or Swiss chard, which tends to grow up and out like on a stalk. This just kind of stays low in really sandy soil. This is really gorgeous spinach, I gotta say. And I'm not gonna worry about like salad spinning this dry or anything. When you saute your spinach with a little bit of water, you're cooking the water out anyway. The spinach is gonna give off water. There's like, oh, actually, I'm gonna chop these bigger leaves just because, but those were BBs. So I'm just bringing this over here to show you what happens. Not unlike leeks when you are rinsing those, you'll notice that the dirt from this spinach will settle to the bottom. So all you have to do is kind of run your fingers through it a little bit to encourage that sediment to fall. This spinach was really nicely cleaned before it came to the market, but I'm just giving it like a secondary sort of little thing. And you'll see once the water settles that you'll be left with like a little pile of sediment towards the bottom. So I'm using like a large pot. You can use any large pot you can find. You could even do this in a skillet if you wanted. I like a pot because I feel like I can fit a lot more of the spinach in at one time. I'll use a little olive oil. I'm just gonna shake off some excess water. See how the sediment is at the bottom? Even if by doing this you kick some of it up, it will still always sink. You might be asking yourself, but can I use frozen chopped spinach? And the answer is yeah. You can do whatever you want.
So you would just like add it to the cream, or?
No, you would still like heat it in a pot and like make sure that the water came out of it and that it felt dry and good to you and seasoned. You can see all that water start to come out, and that's water from the interior of the spinach, which is why it wilts down to almost nothing. That's ASMR. There's cream in spinach. Oh, this will happen if you walk away from your cream. Don't walk away from your cream. Probably my number one like kitchen blooper. Like it happens 90% of the time. I love to multitask, what can I say? I'm gonna use this water to water my plants because I don't like wasting water. All right, this is what we're looking for here. See how dry it is? She's dry, she's ready. I'm gonna kill the heat and just wait for that cream to reduce a little bit. These potatoes, I've boiled. They're baby potatoes. You could use a Yukon Gold, which is slightly larger. I would still boil them whole and then cut them after the fact. You can cut them lengthwise, you can cut them crosswise, you can do literally anything you want to these potatoes. This could be a crispy gratin, it could be a pave, it could be a giant roasty, it could be French fries that you bought from somewhere and reheated in your oven, it could be these boiled potatoes, which I'm gonna toss in a little bit of melted butter and finish with chives. It could be...
Could we revisit the Thanksgiving mashed potatoes?
Mashed potatoes, honestly. All right, I'm gonna set this spinach aside. 4 tablespoons of butter. You could have less, have more, whatever. So I just had a half a stick. Oh, wow, that was very cold butter. Bing bong. Yeah, that was a real bing bong. Some chives. I'm gonna crack some pepper into this butter, which is going to toast the pepper. I think black pepper has surpassed literally every other ingredient as my favorite ingredient. And like, we are always taught to toast our spices, but not our black pepper. It's like, why? It's a spice. Think about it. I'm adding a splash of water to this butter just to kind of stop the cooking, and it's gonna help create more of a sauce then rather than just potatoes tossed in butter, which is good, but it just helps like a more even distribution without having to add more fat. And then we'll just add our potatoes to this little pot of joy. I will say these potatoes are very well boiled, as in I almost basically sort of forgot about them. But it's fine, they're delicious and very creamy. In you go. Everybody in. These potatoes rule.
They look yummy.
All right, these are gonna sit over here. This cream is reduced almost by half over here. When you reduce cream, it almost takes on like a sour cream, like ricotta flavor. It thickens and it becomes even more rich, which means you don't actually need that much of it, but you're evaporating the water, so what you're left with is like the richness of it. So it, to me, is like you're losing viscosity in the form of water, which is like not that much flavor for these purposes because that spinach already has so much of that water, even though we've cooked most of it out. So reducing it kind of makes the entire mixture like the right amount of thickness. So I'm gonna add this mixture to our spinach. I'm gonna start with half, just because I started with about half of the greens I normally use. And I'm gonna simmer this together as well. $102, we're almost there. Yeah, you could turn up your heat to like 325 if you feel like either your oven's not performing where you want it to be or you're in a real rush. But what happens then is that the outside of the meat will always cook faster than the inside. So that's how you get that like ring of gray meat, even if the interior is nicely pink. Doing it the lowest and slowest possible is what gives you like that perfectly cooked pink throughout the entire thing without that like ring of gray. The moment we've all been waiting for, it's been 4,000 hours, just kidding. It's been like 3 and change. Our meat is finally at the right temperature. It is browned on top. If you wanted to go the distance or if your broiler worked, I do recommend further browning it, but even being in there at that low temperature, like the top part has gotten like pretty golden. To make up for the lack of searing, that outside like anchovy crust kind of mimics the flavor of a seared external piece of meat. So for those of you being like, oh, but you didn't sear it, You can sear it and then put it in the oven and then rub it. But to me, this really nicely mimics the flavor with like a quarter of the effort. So that's gonna be it for me. I'm gonna transfer this to a cutting board. And again, the beauty of the reverse sear is that you do not have to wait for this to rest to slice it. Whew. So see all these like lovely little drippings? We do not want to waste those. I am going to use them in a pan sauce and like a board dressing. I do think that this rosemary that has been sitting underneath the beef tastes really delicious. It's almost like it was fried in the fat. It is a delight to snack on. Highly recommend. As for this sort of dripping situation, we can do things like add parsley to it. This is really beautiful parsley. And this will spoon over the meat when we slice it. So if you want to look at our greens, they're sort of like emulsified. They're super wilted. They're just like a shell of their former self. This was 4 huge bunches of spinach, which now look like a tablespoon of spinach. I think like letting everybody see the meat before it comes to the table is part of the game here because it does look so impressive, I think.
Slice at the table or just like wait till people show up?
Definitely wait till people show up. This can hang out in its current state for an extended period of time. There's no real expiration on this. If you are the kind of person who really prefers like a quote unquote hot meat, then you could absolutely pop it into a 425 oven, which will further brown the top, which would not be a bad thing at all. To slice this, I like to take it off the bone. I also like to leave some parsley on the cutting board because as I slice it, it'll pick up some of the juices. It's not especially porous, but it does sort of prevent the juices from going everywhere. And plus this parsley will then make it to the plate to dress the meat. You can definitely do this like big fat, like steak style. If you wanted like thicker pieces, you could cut individual, really nice big thick steaks and then kind of slice crosswise, if that makes sense. But I enjoy taking the meat off the bones this way. I'm literally just following the curvature of the bone with my knife, staying close and cutting all the way down. And keep in mind that the temperatures that I gave you, those are for medium rare and on the definitely rare side of medium, but that's how I prefer my meat. I like to serve alongside. You can crisp them up in the oven if you want, but then you sort of lose those rare bits. And then from here, you sort of have 2 different parts of the ribeye, and they don't always, especially if you don't have like a super long knife, can be challenging to cut this part. So sometimes I'll remove this part here, that front end, and I'll slice it separately. And the thickness of your ribeye slicing is very personal. This is mostly fat, this end here, which is really great for nibbling, but less great for eating. But still nice to look at, I think. Oof, she's a hot one. And no pressure to slice this entire thing. If A, you're not sure how many people you're serving, how hungry people are. Also, it becomes a lot easier to slice super thin, say for a sandwich, although that would be an insanely expensive sandwich. And this all stuff on the board is so good just to scoop up with your knife and spoon over. Cool. Yes, this Angelo Negro from Italy. It is unfiltered. It is delicious. I got it from Kingston Wine in Kingston. Shout out to Kingston Wine in Kingston. Michael, we love you. I don't subscribe to the idea that you should be eating any kind of food with any kind of wine or drinking any kind of wine with any kind of food. I think that you should be drinking the wine that you love no matter what. And there's like this thing where people are like, oh, with a steak or a rib roast, you want like a dark, meaty, juicy red. But I want a really light, beautiful red that's sort of acidic that to cut through all the fattiness of this, which is so, so delicious. I simply cannot wait to eat this. If you wanted to serve this with a wedge salad, that would be incredible. If you wanted to serve this with just baked potatoes, that would also be great. Maybe just some sauteed greens. You don't have to go this like full distance, but if you're looking for ideas on how to serve this, I would say this is a good place to start. So that is our beautiful little prime rib holiday dinner. Doesn't have to be a holiday, doesn't have to be New Year's, doesn't have to be anything, but I do think that celebrating just about anything with a very large piece of meat rubbed in anchovies is like a great way to just say, we did it. You know, I don't know, feels positive. And take these side suggestions or don't. Drink this wine or don't. I feel like this is the main event. This is why we're here. This is what we're talking about, this beautiful baby here. But anything that you decide to do it with is gonna also feel equally special. It tastes amazing. It tastes like I work at a steakhouse.
Bing bong.